Okay. Hello and welcome to the latest Transform Legal video podcast, brought to you by Nexion. Myself, Matthew Newton, as one of the co-founders of Nexion. Nexion provides technology transformation services to the professional services with a particular focus on the legal sector. Today, our session is on document automation and the challenge of change. But I think it maybe could also be renamed Two Middle-Aged Men with Blocked Noses and Head Colds Talk About Legal Tech. So choose whichever title you think's most suitable. So the session, the legal transformation, the Transform Legal podcast series is focused on discussing the hot topics around digital transformation within the legal sector, primarily focused on that SME size law firm, mid-tier and upper mid-tier. Um, we draw on the digital transformation pyramid that ourselves at Nexion use to frame conversations around transformation for our clients and potential clients, where we talk about transformation not being just about technology and throwing doing random acts of technology, as I call it, but it's about getting the people and process in place as well as the technology to be able to move forward your digital strategies. So yes, today we've got a session on document automation and the challenge of change. And we've got with us Rob Lankester, who is a document automation consultant, an all-round Yoda figure within document automation. 16 years in legal ops. He's led large-scale projects at Irwin Mitchell and BCLP. And he spent the last 10 years not focusing on document automation, with the last 6 years operating within a consultancy, his own consultancy, R Legal. And most recently, he's become the Chief Strategy Officer for Contract Genetica, an AI startup enabling easier drafting and a review of documents in MS Word, which hopefully we'll get to touch on today. Okay, well, let's get going.
Hi Matt.
Hi, Rob. Nice to see you.
Yeah, how you doing? All right.
Yeah, I'm good, thank you. How's the nose blockage getting on? Are we
Oh
okay?
yeah, mine's fine. Yeah.
Okay.
I'm just laughing at the introduction you gave me because I seem to be collecting job titles and Yoda is a new one, certainly a new
Document
one. So
automation Yoda. Having known you for a while, I think it's really fitting. My nose situations. I think I'm sounding. I'm not actually from Birmingham or the Black Country. I'm just outside in Kidderminster and Worcestershire. But I sound very brummy today. I think that's the benefit of having my blocked up nose. So please bear with me. So yeah, so cool. So document automation. To start off with, though, the constant theme throughout the conversations I've been having with leading voices in legal tech and digital transformation is to first of all get a bit of an opinion on where we're at in the legal sector when it comes to digital transformation. You're speaking to law firms of all sizes. You've obviously, quoting Irwin Mitchell and BCLP, who you've done large projects for. You've obviously operated at the larger scale, but I know that you've helped much smaller businesses, not just in document automation, but around things such as chatbots and so on. So, just a bit of a comment really. How are law firms getting on in dealing with this challenge of digital transformation?
yeah, look, I think there's a lot of appetite for change and technology more so than ever, and it does continue to grow. Um, but there are still the same challenges, the same difficulties around buy-in, rollout, and adoption. Before we get into that, because I know we're going to talk about quite a lot of that today, I do also think that there's two kind of broader indicators in the market that potentially are interesting to people. One is in terms of the legal tech market itself, the amount of funding that's going into that, the amount of M&A activity, that obviously we've both been familiar with. Yeah, it's that for me is really interesting because it tells me a couple of things really. Firstly, that yeah, there's a lot of opportunity out there and actually still a long way to go, I think, and it's indicative of that because it's not a fully mature uh, market yet, even though it's been around for many years, and for those of us that have been around a long time, feels like forever. It's still in some ways quite a new market. And Alex Baker did a LinkedIn post last week, I think it was, where he was talking about the fact that in ad tech, there's like 15,000 like companies, and in legal tech, there's perhaps only a few thousand. So there's a lot of opportunity. There's a long way to go, and that's not just from a tech perspective, but from that reflective of where the law firms are at as well, I think. And then the second indicator, if you look at actually the recruitment market for roles within law firms in legal tech. I speak to people that are looking for roles, looking for jobs, that sort of thing. And from what I hear, it's an employer's market. There's more people looking than there are roles. When roles do come up, they go really quickly. And so I mean, that you could argue that's indicative of some of the broader economic challenges that we face, but I think also it's a really good indication of the fact that actually forget your conferences, forget what everyone's talking about in terms of real investment in bodies on the ground to actually implement this tech and look at tech within legal. Perhaps there isn't actually as much of that going on as you might think. It varies obviously across the, we're talking in very broad strokes here, and I'm always slightly nervous about making sweeping statements, but yeah, there's a lot there's work to be done. There's work to be done, definitely.
That's such an interesting point because I talk a lot about the complexity of the legal tech market from the law firm's point of view, because working with law firms of all sizes, the common sense that I have, the most frequent used word is overwhelmed. People get very overwhelmed in terms of you know the strategy
Yeah,
that they need to put in place, the people they
yeah,
need to put in place, in terms of identifying who and what that is. But also they get overwhelmed with the amount of choice in through their eyes when
yeah,
it comes to legal tech. So
yeah,
it's surprising that you talk about the difference with the ad sector compared to the legal sector, and
mm,
actually the number of suppliers is much smaller, because the perception, I think, from the average law firm leader or technical lead is that they're just overwhelmed. There's this mounting of suppliers that are constantly trying to contact them and sell them their wares. So
yeah.
why do you think there's that disconnect between actual reality and what it seems like from a law firm?
Yeah, I think it's a really interesting point. And I want to talk about focus in a second, but it's I think that the legal tech is used and seen as a differentiator in the market, right? So every law firm's giving advice and drafting documents, and everyone has good lawyers. And firms are looking for different ways to differentiate, right? So legal tech is used as a key differentiator. It's used as a marketing tool, basically. And so there's a lot of noise, and there is a lot of good things happening beneath the surface as well. But there's this kind of, and it's not a bad thing, right? It's good that we're in the market here. We're in a place where what we're doing is helping firms to differentiate themselves, and offer better services, better outcomes for clients. But it does mean there's a lot of noise, a lot of people talking about what they're doing in the space. Versus in other sectors. I mean, I don't know ad tech specifically, but I imagine that the technology is kind of being used, but it's being used to help people become more efficient. It's not really a sales. It's not being like
Yeah.
we're not an advertising company is not saying, look at our ad tech, isn't it amazing?
Yeah.
Whereas in legal, that's very much what firms do say. We use the latest technology and deliver in the most efficient ways.
So is it the fact that so it's interesting because I think from a law firm point of view, a lot of law firm, especially mid-tier and upper mid-tier and certainly the smaller ones as well,
Mm.
they feel overwhelmed. They feel that there's a lot of noise, from about legal
Yeah,
tech. But actually, the reality that you're painting is there's not actually that many active service providers providing good products within the market. It's just that it feel there's a lot, still, a few thousand is still a lot, but
yeah.
not as much as that. There's more noise than it seems.
Well,
Does it say more about the law firms and how they're ready? how ready they are to engage with the technology. They feel overwhelmed. They feel there's a lot of noise because actually they're not set up to actually engage with these products and service providers and identify whether they match with the need that they have.
I think that the services that are being provided, the law firms are provided, the work they do is complex work. So actually, and it varies massively by sector, right? And you look at some of the high volume uh, personal legal services, insurance, and those kind of sectors, and they've had case management systems and had embedded systems for many, many years. But certainly in business legal service and corporate, and like I mentioned, M&A, but in more complex areas of law, where you've got things being done potentially in a more manual way with highly skilled and highly experienced lawyers delivering those services. Um, it's complex work, right? So breaking that down and trying to productize that and trying to process map that is a lot harder when it's not the process isn't always the same. And it's not always from point A to point B to point C. Um, things can be done in different ways, and I think that that first challenge of actually looking at commonalities across what you do and what people do in your different practice areas, how is the work delivered, and looking for opportunities to automate that is actually not as simple a task as people might think. So I don't think it's about how many tech companies are out there or how many different offerings there are. It's more just about the range and complexity of legal services, and a lot of firms will be offering a whole of market service, so they'll be offering many different services to cover different areas of law, like employment, real estate, corporate, and this is a very broad range of service. So again, that makes it hard for a firm that does that to kind of centrally focus. Um, and so with that, I mentioned focus before because I think with this overwhelm, with all this noise, there's a real need. Like how do you get beyond that, right? And I think there's a real need to focus. There to be more focus on the fundamentals. So change management, continual service improvement, strategy, the structure of the firm, and KM, knowledge management, operations, IT, innovation. Have you got all these fundamentals in place as a foundation to enable you to successfully deliver whatever it is, right? Whatever piece of tech or whatever transformation project it is. And so that for me, that's the that's the starting point.
It's that. I
Um,
mean, so yeah, I mean, this is music to my ears, obviously, because I bore everybody about the importance of process mapping,
yeah,
creating what I call a foundation of visibility across your firm. So, right, how actually
yeah,
is our firm functioning? What are the key business processes? What's the level of maturity of our
yeah,
processes? So we, in our business analysis work, we help firms identify the maturity of their processes. Is it chaotic or is it, defined and so on. Now, what your point is, which is music to my ears, because you're saying, well, there's a lot of noise, but actually there's not as much noise as in other sectors. But the reason why it seems more noisy to a lot of law firm leaders is that actually you're trying to fit this technology to non-standardized, non-visible, non-standardized processes, and with loads of different, culture challenges and change challenges. That's why
mm,
it seems overwhelming. It's not the tech.
yeah,
It's the fact that you're not creating the conditions for success through the process and people piece, which fits in perfectly to my digital transformation pyramid. And I talk about the middle, the operating model. Go to the website and have a look at the video podcast page to look at the image. But that middle
yeah,
bit, which is operating model, that people and process, get that right, and it doesn't seem so overwhelming to implement technology. I know you're going to jump in, but I want to steer it towards document automation.
yeah,
And is
yeah,
that and is that the case with document automation as well? In the fact that you've got to create those conditions for success. I suppose before answering that question, for people, there's going to be a broad range of people
mm,
listening and watching. What is document automation, and what benefits does it give? And then we loop back and say, well, okay, how do you create the conditions for success, and what does a good project look like?
Sure. Yeah. So document automation from an end user perspective is very simply the end user fills out a questionnaire. It populates the document. It creates usually a first draft document. Um, and the user can then amend that document and send it out to the client, do what they need to do with it. But it's primarily about creating that first draft more efficiently. I mean, I'll talk a bit more about the benefits. Maybe I can give a classic example of a document automation project because I'm working on at the moment automating the model commercial lease. And a lease is a good example of a document that you can automate because you'll have so the end questionnaire will have questions around the landlord details, the tenant, obvious things like the name and address, and those can then be inserted in multiple places in the document, including party section, signature blocks, and things like that. So you get some efficiency from inserting information in multiple places in a document. You then get other efficiencies from questions that decide whether clauses come in or out. And the classic example I always give for that is asking about the 1954 Act and are you contracting out of the 1954 Act? Or is the landlord doing that? And if yes, then potentially you don't just get the lease generated, but you can also have some additional supporting documents like a statutory declaration, a landlord's warning notice, things like that. Are you okay, Matt? I'll keep going whilst you get yourself a drink. Um, so yeah, you can create it can create multiple documents from a single questionnaire if needed, simply by answering a yes or no question. And that may also insert specific clauses into the contract itself and change the wording in the contract itself as well. And this is something that I became obsessed with about 10 years ago because you just look at it and when you see it, it's just so obvious. The benefits are so obvious. It's so concrete. And, I like to think I'm very logical and it appeals to my sort of logical brain. Um, and the rules that you put into the document directly result in how the draft looks at the end. So you can rely 100% on the result that's created. It'll be the same every time. Benefits are massive time savings. I'll talk more about this, but over 80% across all the projects that I've delivered for I mean, we're talking law firms 80, 83, 84%. And then in-house, it can be even higher. We can be talking we can talk sort of 95% where they have self-service. And actually the questionnaire or part of the questionnaire is filled out by the business even. So talk about NDAs, right? And you fill out a questionnaire and it populates the document. And if it's a low risk document and the value of the transaction is small, then they get the document straight away. And and therefore legal don't, in a corporate, legal don't even need to be involved at all at that point for some of the more simple documents. It's become self-service. So the benefits are huge there. Also talking about it, I mean, it's sort of obvious really, but increasing the turnaround times on documents. So it's not all about purely time saved, but actually we've got to get this deal done and out the door by the end of the day, and that might be physically impossible if it's going to take 2 days to draft a document. But if it's only going to take 2 hours because you've got this questionnaire, then that actually enables client delivery, client service that you couldn't perhaps have achieved before.
And
Um,
I'm guessing mistakes. I mean, if you've tracked this over your projects, the compliance is increased, and the amount of human errors are reduced. All those benefits as well as. So you're talking about speed,
yeah,
efficiency, but also, yeah,
consistency.
reduce mistakes,
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, much more consistency, both in terms of the
standardization.
documents,
Yeah.
standardization, and then finally the sort of knowledge management benefits. And we're talking about your precedent documents. If you don't have precedents now, well, you will have by the end of the project because you'll have the templates and they're automated. Um, and if you do have precedents already, then firstly agreement and making sure everyone's using the same one, and there's a driver to all use the same one because it's easier to use. And then as a result, the input that goes into that during the project, the testing, it goes through the improve that causes an improvement and to the knowledge base, to the precedents
Robert, it
themselves.
sounds like an absolute no-brainer. So I'm presuming every single law firm in the UK is using it.
Yeah, no.
Okay.
Y-
What, surely they are. It's saving money, all these things that you.
Yeah.
What's the level of adoption and across the UK?
Yeah, so in the really large firms, it's I mean this technology has been around for a long time, and it's very mature. Some of them have got whole teams of people doing this with thousands of documents automated, and yeah, like it's a very mature, ingrained product for the very large firms. But beneath that, I would say it's a real mixed bag. There's outliers, and there's some firms that are doing it kind of directly with clients and having clients kind of log into a portal and that sort of thing, and being quite innovative with it, using it to deliver fixed price services. And then there's others who perhaps, haven't even um, got the software yet. So yeah, there's still and there's still a lot of opportunity. And I will just say, for those that haven't got it yet, it's not too late. I mean, there's some advantages to being a later mover now because actually some of the newer products coming onto the market, different feature sets, perhaps more tailored to the smaller firms, and there's more options now than some of the large firms are really they've got a lot of sunk cost in a particular tool, and for them to move to one of the newer tools would actually be quite difficult. So if you're looking at getting into this now, it's as good a time as ever, and there's been quite a bit of movement the last couple of years with new products. So
Yeah. So
yeah.
so so what's been the barrier to so if we just talk about and draw on your experiences, why aren't some law firms, why haven't they already adopted this? And then within law firms where a program has been started, if adoption has faltered, why has it faltered? So what have been the barriers for this not being widely used across the UK?
Yeah, and I think we'll split this conversation into two parts really. One is the buying of the software, so the project initial implementation phase, and then the other part of it is once you've got the product in the ongoing adoption and how that's going really. Um, and I think in the initials, I mean, arguably across both phases, the challenge is buy-in. The main challenges are gaining buy-in, uh, gaining adoption, gaining budget to do that, and ensuring that I talked about focus, right? Ensuring that it's resourced correctly and that the correct amount of focus. Um, and I think one thing that's unique perhaps about document automation projects, I'm happy to explain a bit more about the process and why this is, but it, most projects, I would say a lot of the work is done up front. Right? And then you go live with a document management system or whatever. On day one, you go live and the product is out there and people are using it. And, there might be some maintenance, but it's minimal, right? After, for document automation, day one is you haven't got any, you've got the software in, but you haven't got any documents automated yet. So you're not yet extracting value from the tool. So you have to you have to automate the documents. And each document really should be treated like a mini project. Um, because you need to work with the lawyers, you need to pick the right documents to automate. And there's all this work that needs to be done to actually deliver the value of the product. Buying the tech is just the start. And actually that's a lot of what I do in my consulting work is that implementation piece, right? Helping with the automation and doing the automation, helping with the engagement, and looking at what documents to automate, and yeah, just helping out with that actual
And which of the
process.
and so for a start, there's a bit of a barrier that some law firms obviously don't see the value or haven't yet understood the value of this, so therefore they
Yeah,
haven't bought the technology. So that's one. And there may be we could there's reasons for that. I haven't done that. Lack of awareness, lack of
yeah,
guidance, uncertainty of it, and all this kind of thing. But then there's the ones that do buy it, and then then there's the next challenge of right, okay, let's roll it out, let's get it adopted. So
yeah,
some of the challenges that you faced on that. So what are the
yeah.
challenges you face on that bit, and then how do you advise people to overcome those adoption challenges?
Yeah, and I've been involved in all the process from all phases right from the beginning. Is it helpful, Matt? If we've got, I don't know if we've got time actually. I'm looking at the time,
Yeah,
but
no,
I
we got
I
time.
I would like, I think it might be helpful to people to actually talk about the start from the beginning and talk about the project I did at Owen Mitchell and
Yeah, sounds great.
how we
Yeah,
set up the foundations for that and what I did, what we did. Um, because I think that was a successful project, and perhaps there's takeaways from that for that even the smaller firms can actually implement um,
yeah,
implement.
let's go
So
for that. Yeah,
um, cool, yeah. So no, I mean, there was a number of factors, right? And one of the I will caveat all of this and say that it was these things we did were unique to the time and the firm, and smaller firms actually you don't need everything that I'm going to talk about now, or you might just need it on a much smaller scale. Um, so I mean, to start with, we had a dedicated operations team, right? So a team of analysts, change managers, led by a very effective operations director in Richard Clark, who I reported into. And we had a clear remit. We had exec support, probably because of that, and also already a shown commitment there from the exec, and already an investment there in terms of I guess the existence of our team and the fact that we were given the opportunity to present and make the case for change and for these various tools. We had an operation strategy that we all fed into and we all helped to build. For me, I was asked to present my vision on document drafting, the sort of broader process of that, if you like. So including the use of knowledge tools and technology as well as the whole process. Not document automation was a very small part of it, and that led to me. I was leading a knowledge management initiative working closely with the head of knowledge, amongst others. And actually, that collaboration piece that we had, so we had a lot of collaboration between knowledge management, IT, operations, and of course the business. So there was a lot of preparation done in that phase, right? So detailed business analysis. I was writing the business case for document automation. We were engaging the users from really early on, and part of the business case is that, right? Is talking to the users and understanding what they need and what their challenges are and that sort of thing. Um, we assigned champions from within the business, within each practice area. So we didn't necessarily have professional support lawyers or knowledge lawyers in every department. So we had these knowledge champions instead. Um, they tended to be junior partners, senior associates, people that essentially were engaged and willing to influence and to get involved. And then later on, we also had specific document automation champions as well to help with the rollout. Because for such a large firm, you need people on the ground in each practice area that know what documents are used most often. Because you can look at the data, but you really need feedback on the ground, and as I said, you need involvement of the lawyers to make best use of the product and to get adoption. So yeah, we had champions in each area. That whole process um, did take a while, and it was a it was a large project. We were implementing a lot of change, not just document automation, DMSs. There was a whole knowledge management piece around know-how and precedents, and it was a large scale project. But I guess from a document automation perspective, all of that work I've just talked about, that's the foundation that we were talking about before. Um, and all of that just got us to day one. So,
So
um,
it's yeah, so much work, so much conversation with users, business analysis, all that good stuff, and giving that visibility.
yeah,
Agreeing what your precedents are. Doing that standardization of documentation and process,
yeah.
and then we're going to start talking about the
and
technology.
and that's
Just
the start.
shows, yeah.
That's the so that's it. We've got sign off for a firm wide, 1,000 licenses or whatever. And the software's there. This is day one. I then became the document automate. So I was a business analyst. That was my background, and led me into this project. I then became the document automation manager, and it became my focus full time. It was already my baby already, kind of, so it was a natural move for me. But yeah, focus again. Someone dedicated full time, or someone dedicating time, should we say? They don't have to be full time, but for the size and scale of the project we were doing, that was appropriate. So like I said, we had really strong engagement from the business champions already, so that was a good foundation. I was doing monthly reporting of benefits and that sort of thing. I had a consultant in Catherine Bamford who was working with me, sat with me 2 days a week for 6 months, actually, learning how to build the automated documents, learning how to do the automation, best practice, etc., etc. I then trained up volunteers in different practice areas to code some of their own documents, obviously with my supervision to ensure consistency and best practice. And I know in previous conversations about we've kind of had discussion about centralizing versus decentralizing teams, and we can get onto that if we have. We'll
Well,
come back to
I
that
mean,
if we have
I would just
time.
kind of what would just flag there was just
Yeah,
for this scale and this for adoption to happen.
yeah.
The term citizen developer, is needed in the fact that people need to take ownership of their own world a little bit and be able to develop and use the technology, for their own purposes rather than just
Uh,
always waiting for a
yeah.
centralized manager to undertake it.
And I think throughout my career, I found, getting dedicated resource, getting headcount to build a large team was actually quite challenging. And that's one of the reasons I got into consulting, to be able to offer that flexible resourcing options to businesses that perhaps can't justify hiring a full-time person to do this. Um, so yeah, all sorts of tactics we would try, like as I say, training up different people in the business areas to do some of their own coding. Um, the result of all of this was 250 documents automated, launched in the first year, with an average of 1.5 dedicated resources in that year, which actually isn't a lot actually for the number of documents that we did. And I think I don't know if that's still the record for the number of the most documents done in a year, but yeah, it was because of the foundation, right? It's because we'd done all of that prep work up front, which was a kind of an ideal scenario where we were starting from scratch and able to do everything properly. Um, at, I then at BCLP, there was different challenges actually because um, that I wasn't actually involved in a lot of that prep work. So the decision to bring in which tool it was, etc. I was brought in to do the global implementation. So I was brought in on what I've been calling day one to do the global implementation. Um, and there was a negative perception of document automation due to a previous failed project where with a legacy tool where the engagement piece hadn't been resourced. That's probably the simplest explanation for that. They did have someone doing coding, but there was no one on the ground, or there was nobody that was their remit was to engage with the business on it. I may be exaggerating there slightly, but that was the broad reason that I understood when I joined. So I essentially spent the first 3 months speaking to partners, um, and saying, look, we've got a chance, we've got bringing in a new tool, we've got a chance for a fresh start here. Let's give it a try. Um, and doing that, really focusing on that engagement piece. I mean, we did do some quick wins. I was obviously doing some automation as well in those 3 months. But in those 3 months, I'd built a pipeline of 500 documents to be automated, and then it was a case of prioritizing those, looking at resourcing options and basically automating as many as I could on my own. And I think some of them were complex documents as well. So we didn't hit the same numbers, but I think 120 documents launched in the first year or two. Um, so yeah,
So
yeah,
the key take, I mean, in terms of the Irwin Mitchell and BCLP projects,
yeah,
what you've indicated is, I mean, it's just the same. I mean, we seem to be saying the same things again and again across these conversations, across this podcast series, where it is the prep work, it is the, it's committed business analysis resources to engage with users to gain visibility of how things are operating now, to get them on board. The other thing that stuck out for me when we had a conversation previously was around the challenge of continuing that change. So yeah, so you've rolled out those 250, if we think about Irwin Mitchell, you've rolled out those 250 documents, but they're not frozen in time, are they? So next year, those 250 documents, do they need ongoing maintenance? And what's the challenge? You've got to manage, you've got to do the change to begin with, but this change should be continuous.
yeah, exactly. When I left, when I left Owen Mitchell, the people that I trained up became they took over the role essentially, and that work continues because yeah, I mean at the very least you've got to maintain the documents, but that's the same even if you've got flat precedents in a if you've got your own precedent store, they need to be kept up to date anyway. So that's where the knowledge management piece comes in, and actually, but rather than them just sitting in someone's drawer, metaphorically speaking, and kind of becoming out of date. And then every time you come to draft a document, you've got to check the precedent and check for any changes in the law, rather than having to do that process every time you're doing a piece of work for a client and it's probably urgent and you haven't really got time. Actually, having that work done in a coordinated way before, ahead of time, um, is a massive benefit to the firm anyway.
You've hit and that metaphorical precedent in the drawer. We know that is literally the case for so many law firms. And the
Yeah.
picture you've painted there of we've got to get a piece of work done, and suddenly we've got all this additional work that we hadn't factored into it. And this is the thing. The technology, the picture you've painted of, right, we're moving to an automated a document automation solution, but actually the byproduct of all your prep work, that's the huge benefit to the firm, standardizing of the precedents and so on. But that should be done anyway.
Yeah.
Forget about the technology.
Yeah.
Those muscles of basically standardizing processes, making sure that precedents are standardized, or that should just be continual service improvement, continual check. That should just be done
Yeah.
anyway.
And
Forgetting
and
about the
this
tech project.
and this is one reason why, like, yes, I talk about ideal circumstances where there's all this analysis work done and you've got these, teams of people and stuff, but actually document automation is an example for me of a piece of technology that the tech drives change itself.
Mm.
So actually, if you haven't got time to map out all your processes, well, you can look at what documents are drafted most regularly. Are you drafting documents? Is it your paper that is the starting point for transactions? You can answer those questions quite quickly. And if so, you can start automating those documents. And in doing so, you can kind of use it to drive the change that you want in the business. And yeah, looking at the Owen Mitchell project, the whole KM initiative, right? And we got all these documents in one place, and there was quite a lot of work involved in centralizing all the know-how and precedents. And then trying to get people to review and approve that content was really challenging until we implemented the automation. And then suddenly we've got 250 documents that have been reviewed to the inch of their life. Like you would never have got if you just said to people, "Can you have a look at this and make sure it's okay?" Um, so yeah, there's an argument here for actually implementing a piece of technology like this and using it to drive the processes and that you
I think,
want.
but I mean that knowledge management. Once again, thinking about the mid-tier people that will be listening and watching,
Yeah,
the mid-tier firms, it can once again all of this can be seemed quite overwhelming. This is the thing, about technology, because the reason why they feel overwhelmed is actually there's not the pillars in place of good knowledge management, good process management,
Yeah.
good change management, all those kind of things.
But it
Therefore,
can
it
all
feels more overwhelming because it's an even bigger piece of work.
it is, but on the same time, if you've got if it's a smaller firm, there's less. I mean, to give it to go really small, right? If you've got 20 people in your firm, you can do that. You can speak to everyone within you can speak to everyone as you would be doing anyway. And this can be a focus of discussions that you're going to have. And if precedents don't exist, then well, the automation process, and I work with clients where to do this. Go, okay, well, let's start with a document that you did for a transaction recently. Let's use that as a start. If that's all you've got, let's use that as a starting point, get some of it automated, get that across to get that across to business, get some feedback on it, and let's start small. Start the process small. So it can be, it can be for smaller firms, it can be yes, it can be overwhelming, but there are steps we can take to one step at a time. And
Just start it. Is basically it's almost like just get started.
yeah,
I'm conscious of like the last 5 minutes of the session. I want to turn a little bit to AI. Every conversation now has to include AI, doesn't it?
yeah,
So obviously, in the introduction I talked about the fact that you're involved as the chief strategy officer for Contract Genetica, which is trying to bring AI into the document automation process.
yeah.
So yeah, how will AI affect document automation, do you feel?
Sure. It's well, I think it's shining a spotlight on you. It's something to compare document automation to. If we're talking generative AI, then you can see the pluses and minuses. You can actually it's bringing a spotlight on legal tech in general, and actually making people realize that you need to focus on. There's still prep work to be done. There's still foundational work to be done in terms of um, Alex Smith calls it IA before AI, right? In terms of your information architecture, your data, the old rubbish in, rubbish out kind of thing. AI is not a magic bullet, despite what people think, and particularly generative AI, because of its creativity, needs some careful consideration around how it's going to be used and why. And actually, when you then look at tools like document automation in comparison, you go, well, we know that's going to give us the same draft every time. So do you want that, or do you want something that's kind of creative and it's going to create you something slightly different every time? They're different tools. Um, for Contract Genetica specifically, to talk about that for a second, because it's complementary to document automation because it really picks up where from the first draft, and also for reviewing documents. It's basically a word add-in that sits there, and you can click as you're working through a document. It'll give you suggestions for alternative clauses. Um, Based on previous deal documents and your precedents. And one thing I really like about it, I mentioned the appeal to me of things that are concrete and logical. And Contract Genetica is that, because the suggestions you get are purely from your knowledge base. So they're not made up. They're not a bit from here, a bit from there. The clause you see will have been used in one of your previous deals, or it'll be used in one of your precedents, depending on how the system, where you point in the system. But you can rely on those suggestions, and it's concrete, so you're going to get the same suggestions each time. And the other thing I like about it, because we spent a lot of time today talking about the work involved in document automation and these projects. With Contract Genetica, you're just pointing it at the database, so pointing it at your documents. There's no training required. There's no coding, anything like that. You just point it at the documents, and then from a lawyer's perspective, they've got this word add in that they can choose. It's fitting in with their existing process. It's not a big change for them, and actually they have control over whether they use it and the extent to which they use the suggestions or not.
Yeah, from obviously my team are doing a lot from around AI and
Yeah,
the fact that you're talking about it being creative. I mean, some of the challenges that we run into because
yeah,
it's such a black box. Um,
yeah,
it's not something to rush into without your always being completely open in some of the challenges of utilizing Gen AI, especially
Yeah.
around legal documents. So what you're
Yeah.
pointing towards is it can augment your current capabilities around document automation. Get document automation in place. Get some of the foundations in place, and then AI can augment your capabilities there. Give you superpowers, but based upon precedent, your existing precedent library, not using it to Gen AI to do a first draft of something.
Yeah, and I think the I call it sort of the great Gen AI the great Gen AI distraction, the great Gen AI distraction, because so much talk and focus on that when actually there's existing tools out there that aren't being fully utilized that are tested. Gen AI it's going to continue to improve as well, but it needs to be looked at properly and researched. It's not just a magic bullet. Oh, we know we've got all these difficult problems, but we can just bring Gen AI in. It's not a magic bullet to solve the bigger challenges.
So to bring to a close, so in terms of key takeaways for people that wish to start, they're either already into a document automation process, or somebody that is looking to get started. What's your key takeaways? What's the key advice that you would give them?
So it's about proper resourcing. I mean, you can say this about any project, right? Whatever you do, make sure you resource it properly. Give it the focus and the attention that it requires. Particularly important with document automation. So if you're going to say one thing, I would say, yeah, resource the engagement piece, resource engagement side of it. Um, but more broadly than that, make sure you resource the implementation correctly. And that can be, we can discuss whether that's contract resource or permanent resource or a hybrid. It doesn't really matter. Each firm will have different needs and resources, but make sure you do that bit properly.
And from my takeaway from our conversation today, it's those foundational pieces. It is that business analysis. I mean, you're talking about resourcing. It is engage with users. It's mapping your processes. It's getting standardization in place. All of that good stuff that hopefully should be a pillar of a well operating business anyway. But get those things in place, and the technology will seem less overwhelming because you're just fitting technology into a standardized, proven process.
If you've got those foundations, great. If you haven't got them yet, start now. But actually, I would also say start small and look to deliver some quick wins in the meantime. And that's what I've always done in all my projects is find something very specific and simple that you can implement that's going to help people because that will help get further engagement with tackling the bigger challenges later on.
Yeah, wonderful. Thanks, Rob. Absolutely brilliant to have a conversation. I always enjoy your input and insight on not just document automation, but also Gen AI, and being you're clearly excited by it, but also bringing a dose of reality to it as well, which we try and do at Nexion. Thanks
Yeah,
a lot for your time. If anybody has any questions as a follow up, please reach out to myself or Rob. You can find us both on LinkedIn or follow up an email more directly. Look forward to our next conversations. Thanks, Rob. Cheers, everyone. Goodbye.
great. Thank you.